Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video drops. Also at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me live on Twitch where we'll talk about anything and everything in our weekly Q&A stream. Link to join below. And now, on with our feature presentation. The last thing anyone likes to hear from their coach after they lost a big game are excuses coming out of their mouth. You never like to see a coach blaming something as the reason that his team lost the game. And there are all kinds of excuses that you'll sometimes see coaches give. Our team was too hurt. The referees missed a call that completely changed the complexion of the game. The overtime rules are stupid and need to be changed. The weather conditions were bad. The wind was not on our side. You've heard them all before. There's plenty of people that will make excuses, even though it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, you still lost. But I promise you that you will never, and I mean never, hear an excuse as stupid as this one, especially when it comes to the over half-century-long history of the Atlanta Falcons. This is head coach Jerry Glanville. I think it's safe to say that Glanville is not exactly the quiet or reserved type, and he's not afraid to speak his mind. Heck, if he thinks that the referee got something wrong, he's not afraid to run onto the field and try and punch him. No, that is not an exaggeration. You can learn more about that craziness by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And of all the things that the outspoken coach has said, and trust me, there's a ton of them, this one might be the stupidest one of them all. Because after a 1991 loss to the Phoenix Cardinals, he blamed the loss on something that has to be seen to be believed. This is the story behind the stupidest controversy in Falcons history. Before I talk about the controversy in question and what the excuse was, we need some context to understand how important this game was, and how the game went. Although you can probably guess right off the bat that the Falcons lost. Because why would their head coach be making excuses after the game as to why they didn't win if they actually won the game? It's October 20th, 1991, and we head down to Tempe for this NFC matchup between the Atlanta Falcons and the Phoenix Cardinals, with a team from Atlanta representing the NFC West and the team from Phoenix representing the NFC East. Division alignments were weird back then, what can I tell you? Anyways, with this being week 8 of the season, as we approach the midway point, the contenders and the pretenders are starting to separate themselves from each other. And by the end of October, no one really knew what to make of the Falcons, because they were truly a bizarre team. No one had any expectations for Atlanta. This was a team that hadn't finished the season at 500 or better since 1982 during the strike-shortened season. They had gone 8 straight seasons with a losing record, and in 6 of the 8 had at least 11 losses to their name. Outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were just an abomination on the sport, you could probably make the argument that from 1983 to 90, there truly was no consistently worse team in football on a year-to-year basis than the Falcons. But in 1991, through their first 6 games, they were 3-3, and were right in the thick of things for a playoff spot. It was somewhat odd, because by this point, the Falcons had a bottom-half offense in the NFC, and one of the 4 worst defenses in the NFC as well. But they were 500, and seemed like they were getting hot at the right time, having won 3 of their last 4 games, including a shocking victory on the road at Candlestick Park the previous week against the San Francisco 49ers, where they won 39-34 and forced 4 turnovers while never once turning the ball over themselves. Considering the fact that the Niners had won 7 of the last 8 meetings between the two sides of Candlestick, and the fact that the Niners entered the game as 10.5-point favorites, truly no one saw this coming. Now the Falcons had a golden opportunity on their hand against the Cardinals. If the Falcons won this game, then they would be above 500 for the first time all season. Not only that, but it would be the first time that they entered the month of November above 500 since all the way back in 1986. If Atlanta won this game, then for the first time in years, they'd enter the second half of the season with a legitimate shot at the postseason. And they were playing a 3-4 Cardinals team that had dropped 4 of its last 5 games, had scored single-digit points in 4 of its last 5 games, had averaged a mere 9.8 points per game over that stretch, and in their last 2 games have been outscored 54-16. This should be an easy win for the Falcons, right? Well, in the battle between the 2 bird teams, at the end of the day, the Falcons were not the bird flying the highest. Everything about this game just seems so uncharacteristic of the Falcons, especially considering how well they have been playing lately. And it wasn't the fact that they lost, rather, it was how they lost, especially since it came against the Cardinals team that was slumping pretty heavily going into this game, and had absolutely no momentum or confidence on their side. The Cardinals won it 16-10, which was a far cry from the 39 points that they scored a week before. The Falcons turned it over 5 times, which was a far cry from the 0 turnovers that they had a week before. The offense got nothing going in the second half, scoring no points over the final 2 quarters of the game. This was a far cry from the 19 points and 4 possessions that they scored on in the second half of the week before. But don't worry, the stats continue to get worse for Atlanta, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The Falcons had a mere 22 minutes and 11 seconds of possession, holding onto the ball for less than 37% of the game. Good luck winning any game at that level, especially the NFL, when your time of possession is that low. In the 3 wins that the Falcons had so far on the year, which oddly enough came against 3 California teams in the San Francisco 49ers, the Los Angeles Raiders, and the San Diego Chargers, the Falcons averaged 30 minutes and 32 seconds of possession. In this game, it was roughly 8 minutes less than that, which is always brutal, but is even more brutal when you're playing in the middle of the afternoon in a desert. The Falcons went just 2 for 9 on third down, converting just over 22% of the time. In their 3 wins so far, they went 16 for 37, converting over 43% of the time. Obviously, 22% is not going to cut it. And starting the game at quarterback for the Falcons was Chris Miller, who I talked about in a previous video of mine when I said how he was brought on to kick a field goal despite being the team's quarterback, and he drilled it to the surprise of everyone. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. This game was not one of Miller's finest moments. He went 13 for 35, completing just over 37% of his passes. He took 2 sacks and threw 4 interceptions, all while posting a passer rating of 29.2, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. For the former first-round pick, this game was so bad that it tied his career high in interceptions thrown. And it didn't help that in the second half, he was an abysmal 2 for 15 with 21 yards passing. Naturally, after this loss in which the Cardinals pulled off the upset by outscoring the Falcons 13-0 over the second half, people were upset, especially Bill Fralick, who was the team's right guard and one of the greatest offensive linemen in the history of the Falcons. Fralick questioned whether his teammates knew what it took to win at this level, and questioned their emotional maturity. As Fralick said on the loss and how Atlanta's roller coaster season had gone so far, it's sickening. Every time we win a big game, we flop the next week. Nobody seems to realize that winning is a continuum. There is no such thing in the NFL as a hump game. You try to build on wins, but some people around here don't understand that process. And perhaps one of those people was his own head coach, Jerry Glanville. Because when it was his turn to speak on the loss, he had what might just be the worst excuse in the history of excuses. And trust me, you're going to want to prepare yourselves for this one. After the Falcons lost this one in front of the 24,124 fans at Sun Devil Stadium, which was the smallest crowd since the Cardinals moved to Arizona in 1988, head coach Jerry Glanville talked about what went wrong. And sure, he blamed the officials for disallowing a touchdown and went in-depth on how the referees admitted their mistake and how that would have changed the complexion of the game. But that excuse isn't what this video is about. You see coaches saying that a bad call changed the game all the time. It was what he said later that made some people's jaws drop. Do you want to know the reason why the Falcons weren't good on this day? Do you want to know why the Falcons laid an egg against one of the coldest teams in football? It was because of their hotel. No, I am not making that up. The reason that the Falcons lost was because of their hotel accommodations. Now, blaming the hotel for being the reason that you lost is already bizarre, but there are some instances where it makes sense. For example, if the players ordered room service and they all got food poisoning and all got sick, yeah, blaming the hotel is a valid criticism. If the hotel did a horrible job with security and they let Cardinals fans know where the Falcons players were staying and allowed the fans to just bang on their doors all night and make tons of noise to prevent the Falcons from getting any sleep, yeah, blaming the hotel is a valid criticism. If there were problems with the hotel, like the fire alarm being pulled every hour in the middle of the night to prevent the Falcons from getting a good night of sleep, or the cleaning service being horrible to the point where there were bed bugs everywhere, again, blaming the hotel is a valid criticism. But that's not what happened. The Falcons stayed at a nearby resort hotel called The Point on South Mountain, which was built in 1986, so it was relatively new. It's not around anymore. However, here's a booklet from 1990 on the hotel so you get an idea of what we're dealing with here. It's absolutely gorgeous. But that wasn't good enough for the Falcons, because in Jerry Glanville's eyes, this hotel was the reason why the Falcons lost the game. As Glanville said, it was too spread out. We had players who couldn't even find their rooms. There were too many distractions. I'm sorry, what? The reason that you lost this game was because your team lacked concentration? And the reason your team lacked concentration was because you didn't like the layout of the hotel? You realize how ridiculous that sounds, right? Of all the things to blame for Chris Miller throwing 4 interceptions, for the offense holding onto the ball for just 22 minutes, for the Cardinals being able to average over 4 yards per carry and convert over 41% of their third downs, and for your offense being so sloppy that they turned it over 5 times, it was the layout of the hotel causing a distraction? I have to break down why this makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever. Because of all the excuses, and I've heard and seen a lot of them, this might be the dumbest one that I've heard. And that's saying something. Number 1, and perhaps most importantly, you picked the hotel! Yes, you are completely right that the hotel is spread out. And it's not like your typical hotel that's one building where you have guys staying on the same floor in close proximity to each other. However, that's also literally the very first page of the promotional booklet for the hotel. So it's not like this was super hard information to find. This shouldn't have come as a surprise if the hotel was laid out that way. If this was a problem for you, and you had a feeling that this hotel layout was going to pose issues, why didn't you just pick another hotel? I can assure you that there are hundreds of other hotels in the Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale area that you could have stayed at that would have fit your criteria. And to be fair to Glanville, he had never played the Phoenix Cardinals before down in Arizona. This was the first time he ever made the trip to Arizona. The Cardinals moved from St. Louis to Arizona in 1988. When Glanville was the head coach of the Houston Oilers in 1988 and 1989, the Oilers never played the Cardinals down there. And in 1990, when he joined the Falcons, even though the Cardinals played the Falcons that season, that game was in Atlanta. This meant that Glanville was making this business trip for the first time. However, in 1989, the Falcons played the Cardinals down in Arizona. There were many players on that 1989 team, like Chris Miller and Deion Sanders, that were on the 1991 team. Glanville easily could have asked the guys on that team, "Hey, what hotel did you stay at when you played there? Did you like it? What do you remember about it?" The fact that he didn't do that is mind-boggling if the layout of the hotel bothered him that much. Or if he didn't trust his players, he could have asked other coaches their thoughts on what hotels are good. Now you might be saying, why would another coach help out Glanville and give him advice on where to stay? And even if that was true, and even if no coach wanted to give him good advice on the best hotels in the Phoenix area, if only Glanville had a coach on his team who knew the Arizona area well, and might have had an idea as to what hotels near Sun Devil Stadium are the most optimal for a team. Oh wait, he did! In 1991, the defensive coordinator of the Falcons was this man right here. This is Doug Shively, and in 1983, he was the head coach in the USFL for, guess who, the Arizona Wranglers. And the Wranglers played at Sun Devil Stadium, as in the same stadium that this game between the Falcons and the Cardinals was being held at. You had a coach on your team that was a pro football coach in Arizona. Surely he knew a thing or two about good places to stay in the region, especially since it's customary for the home team to stay at a hotel the night before a game. But nope, Glanville clearly did no research whatsoever if he's blaming the hotel for this problem, despite the fact that he had players on his team that went to play the Phoenix Cardinals 2 years before, despite the fact that he had a coach on his staff that knew the area well, and despite the fact that travel agents and team operations people exist for a reason. Now, to Atlanta's credit, after this loss to the Cardinals, they bounced back incredibly well. They went on a tear and became one of the hottest teams in football, winning 7 of their next 8 games, with a lone loss in that stretch coming against Washington, one of the greatest teams of all time, who would go on to win the Super Bowl. The Falcons finished the season with a 10-6 record, which is quite the turnaround after starting 3-4. And Chris Miller bounced back nicely from that disaster in the desert, as he made it to the Pro Bowl and led a Falcons offense that averaged 31 points per game over the final 6 games of the regular season. And for the first time since the strike in 1982, the Falcons made it to the postseason, and they even won a playoff game for just the second time in franchise history, with the other time coming in the 1978 wildcard round against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I guess everything worked out for Atlanta in the end. Maybe they were a bit more selective with their lodging, or just put more thought into what hotels they were going to be staying at every time they played on the road. However, even though it worked out for the Falcons in the end, it still doesn't take away from just how laughable and how bad this excuse is. Most of the time, when coaches make excuses, it's for things completely out of their control. You can't control the fact that a referee is going to blow a call with a game on the line. You can't control the fact that the weather isn't in your favor. You can't control that the flip of a coin didn't go your way. You can't control the fact that a star player suffered a freak injury. But in this instance, yes, you absolutely could control where you were going to stay, and you absolutely could have picked a hotel that was to your liking. You can't blame the hotel for being too large, when if you did 5 seconds of research, you would have realized that the Point on South Mountain was literally the largest resort in the West. Everything about this controversy was just stupid. The 1991 Falcons may have been too legit to quit, but in this case, it would have helped Jerry Glanville if he just quit talking before he completely made a fool out of himself. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.